Hey, Dr. McLeese here from Better Than the Honeymoon. And I just wanted to share another one of the live videos that I've done in my Facebook group because I feel like it would be applicable and helpful for you. So the first portion of the video, actually the entire video, I'm answering a couple of questions that were asked in my Facebook group. The first part of the video is specifically for anger and how do you handle anger in your home, especially in this time of pandemic and social isolation, where many of us are spending more time with our spouse than we were maybe a month or two ago. And so this particular video answers that question. How do you handle it if there's anger in your marriage? This is not related to abuse. It's outside of that, but just anger and frustration in marriage. So it talks about how to handle that in your communication. And then it also discusses at the end, or rather I discuss at the end, what to do if you have a spouse that has an autism diagnosis. So someone in the group had specifically asked, what do we do with our communication because it's impacted our sex life? So how do we move forward with this? So I give a few tips for that at the end of the video. They can be helpful even if you don't have a spouse with autism, but it's particularly helpful for the couple that are in that type of relationship. So listen in. Let me know if you have any questions. You can email me at drjessica@betterthanthehoneymoon.com or just visit my website at betterthanthehoneymoon.com. All right, here's the video. Hi guys, so I have been trying to go live this week, as y'all know, and one of the things that I've been doing is just asking if you had any questions and what things might be helpful for you to know about. So I had two things asked on the last time I posted that, or two things specifically requested, and so I'm going to go through those. Like I've said before, if you have more things that you have questions about or want to know, this is a great time to ask them because I have a little bit more freedom and flexibility in my schedule right now to jump on and give some of these thoughts. So I welcome your questions. All right, so the first question was specifically about what do you do if there's anger in your marriage and you're finding that you react in angry ways, and especially with the extra added stress that we're all feeling nowadays, what does it look like to handle this appropriately? Now, the original post was very specifically saying this is not abuse in any way. This is really more justified anger. Something has happened in the marriage and you guys are trying to connect again. Now, I do want to just give a small disclaimer. All of the advice that I'm about to give is really great if you're in a healthy relationship and there is no abuse. When there's abuse going on in the relationship, know that these tips are not really recommended. There's deeper work that has to go on there. So this is specific to healthy marriages where one person experiences a little bit of anger or has in the past, and now you're concerned about bringing up specific topics or questions. So first of all, I do want to remind you that Ephesians 4:26 warns us, first of all, not to sin in our anger. And then it also says that not to let the sun go down on your anger. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about that not letting the sun go down on your anger means that you need to speak quickly about what's going on. Don't go to sleep. Make sure that you've got everything solved. I'm actually going to tell you that's not the case. So if your anger is going on too much, we've talked about the frontal lobe and how the frontal lobe keeps us making wise, good decisions when it's working. But when you're highly activated in some kind of emotional mood, like anger, for instance, the frontal lobe doesn't work so great. So all of a sudden, you can't have conversation like you should have. So when the word is telling us not to let the sun go down on your anger, first of all, I would just say, recognize that this is a call to dealing with things quickly, not letting them fester, not letting it go days. And if we take it too literally and say, well, the sun can't go down when you're angry, then if you're past sundown and you're having an argument, you're already living in sin. Clearly, this isn't what the word is saying. It's telling us to deal with things quickly. And I do recommend that you deal with things quickly when you're rested and when you're in a place where you can. So it's really important to have kind of a chill out moment if necessary, to have a cool off period where you step away for a moment until you're both calm enough to deal with the issue at hand. But we do want to make that kind of a quick approach. So you don't want to have that chill off period for weeks or months, or get to the place where you just don't mention it at all because it's more difficult to bring it up. Handle the conversation and do so quickly. that other piece of in your anger, do not sin. We got to be really careful when we're dealing with anger that we're not calling out a person's character. So we're not saying you're bad, you're mean, you are like this all the time. All of those things only cause more problems when you're angry. So what we want to do is actually call out the specific situation and the actual issue that's a concern. You call out the behavior, not the character, kind of thing. So if you're upset about the way chores are delineated, or if you're upset about feeling you're not getting a lot of help around the house, you want to speak directly and specifically to that, not to the other person's character. So in other words, you wouldn't say something like you're lazy. You would say instead, hey, sweetie, I'm really feeling like I need your help. Can you step it up a notch in this area? You see the difference between the two? So one is kind of name calling and judgmental and ugly, finger pointing, and the other is actually specifically asking for your request to be met. So we want to stay on the side of specifically asking for your request to be met. Now, the other part that was being asked is, how do you handle this when you're used to seeing an angry response from your spouse and you don't want to see that, you don't want to have to put up with that. So I'm going to talk a little bit for the spouse that is experiencing the anger and things you can do differently. So I hope that you'll watch this with your spouse. But I also want to address, what is it like when you've seen a lot of anger in your relationship and you want to make sure that it's a safe space to talk again. So let's deal first with the angry part and then go into, what do you do if you're on the other side of that and you're the recipient of the anger and you're trying to make sure that things are going to go more smoothly in your relationship. So first of all, for the spouse that deals with the anger, I would encourage you to seek some understanding for why you are angry. We can get angry for a number of reasons. You can feel that there's been an injustice done to you. You can feel like you're not being respected. You can feel like someone doesn't understand your needs or is unwilling to meet them. All of these things can lead to anger, and there can be other reasons why as well. Maybe you even grew up in an angry home and it's literally the only response you've ever seen, the only one you've ever known. And so you have to even battle just kind of this internal drive of what it looks like to only know how to react in anger. So there can be a lot of reasons behind it. But we want to take a look at what is the actual reason for being angry. Beyond, you may be mad when you did this. I mean, really doing some digging and trying to understand, what about that behavior actually upset me? What did I feel you were saying by the behavior? What did I feel you were telling me or saying about me based on your behavior? Okay, so we got to dig a little bit deep. I'm a big fan of asking God to reveal to you what it is that's going on inside of you that's making you angry. So to spend some time with Him in prayer and say, God, you know who I am, you know my thoughts, you know my ways. Help me understand what's going on in my life. So in Psalm 139, David actually prays this really beautiful prayer about how the Lord knows him. And one of the things he says is, reveal to me if there's anything in me that needs to change. And so I would encourage you, when you're feeling that anger, make that a time to talk to God and say, reveal to me what needs to change in my life. Why am I getting upset about this? Why am I lashing out? Why am I name calling? Show me my own sinfulness and where I need to change. Okay, it's a great prayer. And by the way, don't be too surprised if you then get some on-the-job training. So if you pray that prayer, expect that there might be moments coming up where you're going to see that anger rising up in you more often, and you're going to see God teaching you how to deal with it. So welcome that, embrace it, and be willing to look at your own reasons for getting angry. Okay, now if you are the spouse that gets angry, or even if you're not and you're trying to speak to your spouse about something, I would encourage you to start with some deep breathing. So I talked about this in a video before, but the way we deep breathe is in through the nose for a few seconds and out through the mouth. So it calms your system, and actually we know that it takes about 7 breaths for us to calm down. So if you're getting upset or you're getting angry, you're going to need to take about 7 breaths just for your body to kind of regulate where you're peaceful now and you can have a conversation. So keep that in mind when you're talking to your spouse. Now, if you're on the other side of that and you say, well, I'm not the one getting angry, but my spouse often gets angry and I need to bring something up, how do I do this in a way where I feel safe and I feel like we can have this conversation? So a couple of tips for you. First of all, if your spouse is open to it, have them watch this whole part of the video that I've already done so that they can get an understanding of how they can approach topics a little bit differently. Okay. Now, granted, I know asking someone who gets angry easily to examine why they get angry may not come with a receptive response. So if that's the case and that's where you're at, I would tell you it's important to go ahead and address those fears of anger. So talk to your spouse and say, I'd like to have a conversation with you about whatever the situation is. And I know in the past when we've talked about it, it hasn't gone well. I feel like I've said things that have kind of set you off or made you upset. And I really want to make sure that when we talk today, I'm not doing that. Okay, you can actually ask your spouse, are there certain words that we can use when we talk about this? Are there certain trigger words that set you off or make you feel disrespected, or make you feel like I'm being mean or ugly in any way? And then you can avoid those words. So if you remember last time I did a video, I talked about sexual terminology, and learning what kind of words you can use when you're talking about your sex life. This is actually across the board. We need to do that with other areas as well. So we should know our spouse's hot buttons. We should know the topics that cause them problem and cause them upset feelings, and we should try to avoid those if we can. And if they're topics that we actually need to deal with, we want to talk about them in ways that are going to be healthy and helpful for the relationship, using the words that are going to be kind of easiest for your spouse to hear. Okay, now the other question that was asked, we were doing a video, or I was doing a video rather, completely on communication in sex and what do we do with miscommunications. And somebody had asked, can we touch on this just a little bit for if you're in a relationship with an autistic spouse and what that looks like? So I have worked with several couples where one spouse is autistic. So far across the board, it's been the man that has been autistic, but that isn't necessarily always going to happen. But there are far more men. About 4 times as many guys get diagnosed with this as girls. And so it can become where that's just going to be what I see and what others may see. So I wanted to give just a few tips. And even if you don't have a spouse that's autistic, it may be helpful to hear this because it would work somewhat for people that are just more analytical as well. So if you have a spouse that's extremely analytical, you may find these tips helpful, but this is more so for the couple with an autistic spouse in the relationship. Okay, first of all, when you have someone that's dealing with autism, you have to realize that they need you to be incredibly literal, absolutely specific, and telling exactly what it is that you need or want at the moment. In fact, here's an example. It's kind of an interesting story that I had heard. So I was working with a couple at one time where the wife was trying to express, hey, Mom. My mom's watching, y'all. Oh, and loving the video. Thanks. So I was working with a couple where the wife was saying one of her primary upsetting feelings, and this comes to that communication, but also to sexuality, is she would tell her husband that she wanted sex, and he'd be like, okay, cool, let's do this thing. And so there was no foreplay because in his mind, well, you said sex, so that means I'm supposed to start right now. So you have to be more literal with the person that has autism. That means specifically laying out for them, this is what I hope for, this is what I want, this is what I need you to do, and being clear and specific more than you would with most people because they just don't get that piece of flexibility. They need to know literally what you want. Now, I would encourage you, if you're a spouse that really longs for the romance and you long for a little bit more flexibility in the relationship where you don't have to speak every need, just know that this might be a place where you have to give a little and you have to sacrifice some of that hunger because your spouse just won't get it. They don't have the same emotional connections that you'll have, and so you just have to know that going into the relationship that you're going to have to teach them how to help you feel loved and connected because it's not going to be all that natural for them. Okay, secondly, if you have a spouse that's highly analytical or that's autistic on the autism spectrum, one of the things you can do is help them learn how to properly express emotion and how to properly understand your emotions. So I'm actually going to add another worksheet here to the group that'll help with that, and it's called the Range of Emotions worksheet. And so it has our 4 primary emotions on there, which would be happiness, sadness, loneliness, and anger. And then it gives you a range. So starting from a very low level of anxiety or a low level of loneliness, low level of anger, and then it goes all the way down to those deeper feelings. So what you can do is you can literally take this worksheet, you guys can talk together, and you can say, I'm feeling frustrated. And you guys can look at that sheet and your spouse will know, oh, frustrated. So you're a little bit mad, but you're not angry with me. So it just gives them wording to use. And then you can do the same with them. Okay, next thing, you got to practice some acceptance. So if this is the spouse you have, they're either more analytical or on the autism spectrum. You've just got to practice some acceptance and know, like, this is what we've got. One of us understands emotion more fully than the other, and it is what it is. So we've made this commitment together. We've decided we're going to work on our relationship. We've decided we're going to learn to love each other well. But in the midst of that, we also have to understand this is just a difference between us that may never change. And so there's a piece of this that's about accepting your spouse as they are and learning to love them anyways. So looking at the things that first brought you into the relationship, the things that first excited you, and remembering those positive moments. Think of them often. Praise your spouse in your head and also verbally. Let them know those things that are important to you and for the long-term benefits in your relationship. That may be hard work, that may be a humble spirit, whatever it is. And again, that's something that works in every relationship, but it's really helpful if your spouse is on the autism spectrum. And then finally, I would encourage you, if you have a spouse that's on the autism spectrum, know that they're not going to be great at seeing how one situation is similar to another. So for instance, if your aunt is sick and you want to go visit her and you're thinking about her and you're grieved because she's sick, your spouse may not be able to translate that later to, oh, now you have a friend that's sick. And so they may not know, well, you wanted me to rub your feet at night when you came home because your aunt's sick and you're sad. They're going to think, well, that's what you wanted for your aunt. How would I possibly know you want that for a friend that's sick? So they don't understand that flexibility like a lot of people do. So this means being willing to keep going back and teaching them, hey, this is what I need in this situation, and being willing to let your spouse grow in that area. Now, this is for all couples, okay? I have heard people say before, if my spouse really knew me, if they really got me, then I wouldn't have to teach so much. I wouldn't have to tell them what to do. They would know what to do. I would encourage you, if that's you, to give your spouse some grace and remind yourself that if they're doing these things that they know you appreciate, that's a really beautiful way for them to show you that they love you and that they're trying. So if they don't get it right away and you have to reteach, love and honor them for being willing to do what you teach them to do. It's a beautiful part of sacrifice. It's a beautiful part of loving someone to purposely do the things they've asked you, even if it doesn't come naturally. So give them grace for that, love them well, and teach them how to love you well also. All right, guys, that's it. Like I've been saying, I appreciate your questions. Jump on in and send them if you have them, and I would be happy to answer as many as I can. All right, God bless, guys. Bye.